Oakwood High School, situated in the middle of a lively and diverse suburban area, was about to become the center of an unexpected controversy. It all began when Jasmine Carter, a bright and determined 16-year-old African-American girl, set up her lemonade stand to raise money for charity. Little did she know, her simple act of kindness would bring out deep-rooted prejudices and ignite tensions in the town. The local police chief, Ryan Callahan, frustrated by the town's shifting demographics, saw an opportunity to assert his authority when he noticed Jasmine's stand. But when Jasmine's father, Marcus, arrived at the scene, the situation took an unexpected turn. Marcus wasn't just another concerned parent. His presence would prove to be pivotal. Who was Marcus, and why was his involvement so crucial? How would the clash between a well-intentioned teenager, a prejudiced police chief, and a father with a hidden past spark a wave of change in Oakwood? Let's dive deeper into this gripping story. But before we do, feel free to drop a comment about where you're tuning in from, and if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe. As the final bell rang at Oakwood High School, signaling the end of another busy day, students spilled out of the building. Their laughter and chatter filled the air with the excitement of freedom. Among them was Jasmine Carter, walking with purpose, clearly different from the rest. With her deep brown eyes full of determination, she adjusted the straps of her heavy backpack, weighed down by textbooks on anatomy and biology. While most of her classmates were planning their afternoons, talking about trips to the mall, basketball practice, or the latest viral TikTok challenge, Jasmine had other things on her mind. As she descended the school steps, snippets of conversation from her peers floated around her. "Did you see the new TikTok challenge?" a girl squealed to her friend. "I can't wait for the party this weekend," another boy exclaimed, high-fiving his buddies. Jasmine smiled politely as she passed them, but deep down, she felt a sense of disconnection. While she enjoyed the typical teenage activities, her aspirations stretched far beyond the daily concerns of her peers. Her dream of becoming a doctor wasn't just a fleeting thought, it was her life's mission. She was driven by a passion to help others, a calling that motivated her every step. As she made her way home, her thoughts drifted to the people she wanted to help in the future. Children in underprivileged countries suffering from preventable diseases, elderly patients needing care and compassion, and families facing health crises they couldn't afford to address. The sound of laughter from a nearby playground brought her back to the present moment. She paused to watch the children playing on the swings and slides, their carefree joy reminding her of the stark inequalities in the world. How many children, she wondered, didn't have the chance to experience such simple joys because they lacked basic health care? This reflection only strengthened Jasmine's resolve. The lemonade stand she was setting up wasn't just a school project or a way to enhance her college applications. It was her first real step toward making a difference. The money she planned to raise might seem small in the grand scheme of things, but to her, it was a symbol of hope and the power of individual action. As she continued walking, her thoughts shifted to her father, Marcus. She knew he worked for the government, but the specifics of his job were always kept vague. The mystery surrounding his profession sometimes weighed on her, especially when her friends speculated about what her father did. But Jasmine had learned to respect his privacy, even if the secrecy left her with lingering questions. Lost in thought, she nearly passed the community center without noticing. The faded sign and peeling paint couldn't hide the vibrant energy inside. The sound of children's laughter and the rhythmic bouncing of basketballs drifted out through the open windows. Jasmine smiled, remembering the hours she had spent there volunteering, tutoring younger kids, and helping with after-school programs. On a whim, she decided to stop in. As she pushed open the heavy doors, the familiar smell of floor cleaner and chalk dust greeted her. Miss Thompson, the hard-working and dedicated director of the center, looked up from the front desk with a warm smile. "Jasmine, what a lovely surprise." "How are you, dear?" she greeted. Jasmine returned the smile. "I'm doing well, Miss Thompson. Just wanted to check in and see how things are going around here." Miss Thompson's eyes crinkled with affection. "Oh, you know, the usual, leaking roof in the art room, not enough volunteers for the summer reading program. But the kids are as resilient as ever, she said with a chuckle. Jasmine nodded, her determination growing. I was thinking, I want the money from my lemonade stand to go to the center. Maybe we could fix that roof or buy some new books for the reading program. Miss Thompson's eyes welled up with tears of gratitude. Jasmine, you are one of a kind. Any amount would be a blessing. As Jasmine left the community center, her steps felt lighter. The lemonade stand had taken on a deeper meaning. It wasn't just a school project anymore. It was a way to help the center and the children who depended on it. She quickened her pace, eager to get home and start planning, but there was one more stop she needed to make. Turning down Maple Street, she headed toward Lena's house. The sight of the peeling yellow paint and the overgrown lawn told the story of the struggles Lena's family faced. Jasmine's heart ached for her friend. She remembered the countless times Lena had confided in her about her family's financial difficulties. She knocked on the door, hearing muffled voices and the faint sound of a television inside. A moment later, Lena appeared, her tired eyes lighting up when she saw Jasmine. "Hey, Jay. Didn't expect to see you today," she said with a weak smile. Jasmine returned the smile warmly. "Just wanted to check in. How are you holding up?" Lena shrugged and stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind her. Same old, same old. Dad's still out of work, and Mom's picking up extra shifts at the diner. I'm thinking about dropping out of school to help out more. Jasmine's heart sank. She knew how much Lena had struggled academically, but the thought of her giving up on school entirely was hard to bear. "Lena, I know things are tough right now, but you can't give up. You're so smart and capable," she said gently, placing a hand on her friend's shoulder. Lena scoffed, but there was no real conviction behind it. "Easy for you to say, Miss Straight A. Not all of us are cut out for school." Jasmine shook her head firmly. "It's not about being cut out for it. It's about pushing through and believing that things can change." An idea began to form in Jasmine's mind. "Hey, why don't you help me with my lemonade stand this weekend? It's for charity, and I could really use an extra set of hands." Lena raised an eyebrow. "A lemonade stand? Aren't we a little old for that?" Jasmine laughed. "It's for a school project, but more than that, it's for the community center. Every bit helps." Lena hesitated, then shook her head. "I'd love to, but I'm busy this weekend. Mom needs help at the diner." Jasmine tried to hide her disappointment. "No worries. Take care, okay?" Jasmine said, her voice soft, as she said goodbye to Lena. She resumed her walk home, her thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. The lemonade stand had turned into more than just a school project or a charity event. It now symbolized hope, not just for the community center but for herself. Yet, despite her determination, she couldn't shake the loneliness that crept in, knowing she'd be taking on this challenge alone. Little did she realize, that simple act of selling lemonade would soon set off a chain of events that would rock her entire community. As the sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the streets of Millbrook, Police Chief Ryan Callahan climbed into his patrol car. His weathered face, permanently set in a deep frown, showed the wear and tear of years of service, and, if he admitted it, growing bitterness. Callahan scanned the neighborhood as he pulled away from the station. The streets, once familiar, now felt foreign to him, filled with new faces and shifting demographics. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was a relic, a leftover from a time that was slowly fading into the past. "Another day in paradise," he muttered sarcastically, adjusting his rear-view mirror. Beside him sat Officer Malcolm Green, clearly uncomfortable. At 35, Green was almost 2 decades younger than Callahan, and the generational divide between them often felt like a wide gap. Green, trying to lighten the mood, spoke up, "It's not so bad, Chief. Crime rates are down this quarter." Callahan snorted. "Numbers on a page, Green. They don't tell the whole story." As they drove, Callahan's mind wandered back to a frustrating conversation he'd had with the mayor earlier that week. The mayor had pushed for more community engagement, which, to Callahan, was just another way of saying his old ways weren't good enough anymore. "You know why we're out here today, Green?" Callahan asked, his voice gruff. Green hesitated before answering. "The mayor's new community initiative?" "That's right," Callahan confirmed, dripping with sarcasm. "Apparently, writing tickets and keeping the peace isn't enough anymore. Now we have to be social workers and PR agents, too." The tension in the car grew as the silence between them deepened. Green glanced at Callahan, noticing the tight grip on the steering wheel and the hard set of his jaw. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life. "Unit 17, we've got a report of a car break-in on Maple Street. Elderly woman called it in. Can you respond?" Callahan grabbed the radio. 10-4, dispatch. "We're on our way." His face broke into a grim smile as he flipped on the sirens and sped up. "Now this is more like it, Green. Real police work." They pulled up to a quaint house on Maple Street, where an elderly woman stood on the porch, wringing her hands nervously. Callahan approached her, his demeanor softening in a way that surprised Officer Green. "Ma'am, I'm Chief Callahan. Can you tell me what happened?" he asked, his voice gentle. The woman, Mrs. Thompson, nodded, still shaken. I saw someone breaking into my neighbor's car. A young man, he was using something to force the lock." Callahan's face darkened. "I see. Can you describe him?" Mrs. Thompson hesitated, her eyes flickering to Officer Green before speaking. "He was a young black man, wearing a hoodie." Callahan nodded, his expression betraying no surprise. "Not unusual in this neighborhood," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. "With all these people moving in, they're always causing trouble." Mrs. Thompson's face paled, uncomfortable with the chief's comment. She glanced nervously at Officer Green, who maintained his professional posture, though the tension in his jaw was unmistakable. "Green," Callahan barked, "go check out the car, see if you can find any evidence." Green obediently moved toward the vehicle, leaving Callahan to reassure Mrs. Thompson. "Don't you worry, ma'am. We'll handle this. It's a real shame what's happening to the neighborhood, isn't it?" Mrs. Thompson nodded weakly, too intimidated to voice her discomfort with the chief's attitude. After gathering what little evidence they could, Callahan and Green returned to the patrol car. As Callahan continued muttering about the changing neighborhood, Green stayed silent, his discomfort growing more evident. As they resumed their patrol, Green's phone buzzed in his pocket. He stole a glance at Callahan, who was focused on the road, and discreetly checked his phone. It was a message from his wife, Sarah. "Everything okay at work? You seemed stressed this morning. Love you. Green's thumb hovered over the screen, a wave of emotions washing over him. He thought about the hopes and dreams that had brought them to Millbrook, the fresh start they had hoped to build. But the reality of the job, the constant conflict between his conscience and duty, was starting to weigh heavily on him. He typed a quick response. "It's fine. Just a busy day. Love you, too." The lie left a bitter taste in his mouth. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, catching his reflection in the side mirror. The face staring back at him looked older, more worn than he remembered. For the first time, Green wondered how much longer he could continue like this, caught between the officer he wanted to be and the broken system he served. Callahan's voice broke through his thoughts. "Eyes on the road, Green. We're not out here for sightseeing." Green straightened in his seat, refocusing on the street, but a growing knot in his stomach told him something had to change. He just didn't know if he had the courage to make that change when the time came. Little did he know, that moment was fast approaching, in the form of a young girl's lemonade stand, a confrontation that would soon change their lives forever. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street as Jasmine Carter stood behind her makeshift lemonade stand. She had set up a folding table draped with a bright yellow cloth, a pitcher of freshly squeezed lemonade, and a stack of paper cups arranged neatly before her. A hand-painted sign leaned against the table, reading, "Lemonade for Charity $1. Help support disabled children." Jasmine's eyes gleamed with determination as she called out to passers-by, her voice strong and confident. "Fresh lemonade. Help support a great cause." A few neighbors had already stopped by, praising her efforts and dropping extra dollars into the collection jar. As she poured a cup for Mrs. Johnson from down the street, Jasmine's thoughts drifted back to the conversation she'd had with her father just days ago. It had been one of those rare moments where Marcus had let his guard down, sharing some of the struggles he faced in his line of work. His words still echoed in her mind. "Jasmine," he had said, his usually stern face softening as he spoke, "the world isn't always fair. There will be times when people judge you before they know you, just because of the color of your skin." Jasmine had nodded, a lump forming in her throat. It wasn't the first time they'd had this conversation, but it felt different this time. More real, more urgent. "But remember," Marcus had continued, his voice low and steady, "you are strong. You are smart. And you have every right to be wherever you are, doing whatever you're doing." He paused, making sure his daughter understood. Marcus had Jasmine's full attention as he continued, "If you ever find yourself in a situation where someone in authority questions you, remember a few things. Always speak clearly, don't let them intimidate you, and if you need me, call. No matter what, I'll be there." Jasmine had hugged her father then, feeling the strength in his embrace and drawing courage from his words. She knew his job often involved dangerous situations, and his advice came from years of hard-earned experience. Now, standing behind her lemonade stand, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just selling lemonade. She was taking the first step toward making a real difference. As the afternoon stretched on, Jasmine spotted a group of white boys approaching her stand. She recognized them from school. They were on the football team and had a reputation for causing trouble. Her heart sank a little, recalling the times they had bullied others. But she stood tall, remembering her father's words about holding her ground. "Well, well, well," the tallest boy said, sneering as they approached. "Look at this. Little Miss Do-Gooder trying to save the world one cup of lemonade at a time." Jasmine squared her shoulders, meeting their eyes with steady confidence. "That's right," she replied, her voice firm. "Every little bit helps. Want to buy a cup? It's for a good cause." The boys exchanged glances, clearly taken aback by her composure. "We're raising money too, you know," another boy said, waving a clipboard. "For new uniforms for the team. At least that's useful, not like helping a bunch of cripples." A flash of anger surged through Jasmine at the cruel comment, but she kept her cool. "I think helping people who can't afford health care is pretty useful," she said evenly. "But I'm sure your uniforms are important too. Good luck with your fundraiser." The boys shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting such a calm and confident response. After a moment of awkward silence, they moved on, muttering among themselves. Jasmine watched them go, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. She had stood her ground, just as her father had taught her, and it worked. With no one else around, she paused to savor the small victory. This felt like the beginning of her journey toward becoming a doctor, where she would dedicate herself to helping others in meaningful ways. Feeling the need to share the moment, she pulled out her phone and scrolled to her father's number. Even though he couldn't be there, she wanted to tell him about what had just happened. The phone rang twice before Marcus picked up. "Hey, sweetheart. How's it going?" Jasmine's voice bubbled with excitement. "Dad, I've just set up the lemonade stand. It looks great, and I think we're going to raise a lot of money for the community center's Disabled Children's Fund." There was a pause, and Jasmine could almost see her father's proud smile through the phone. "That's wonderful, Jasmine. I'm so proud of you for taking the initiative. You're really making a difference." Jasmine beamed at his words. "Thanks, Dad. I just wish you could be here to see it." "Me too, baby," Marcus replied, though there was a hint of regret in his voice. "But you know how work is." "Listen, Jasmine." He hesitated for a moment, and Jasmine sensed something had changed in his tone. "What is it, Dad?" Marcus sighed softly. "I just want you to be careful out there, okay? Keep your wits about you. What you're doing is great, raising money for disabled kids, but some people might not understand. They might even say hurtful things." Jasmine frowned, confused. "Dad, why would anyone laugh at helping disabled kids?" "I know it doesn't make sense, sweetheart," Marcus said gently. "But sometimes people fear or don't understand things that are different. If anyone tries to give you a hard time, stay strong. Don't let them get to you. You have every right to be there, doing what you're doing." Jasmine's expression softened, touched by her father's concern. "Actually, Dad, something like that already happened." Marcus's voice sharpened with interest. "What happened?" Jasmine recounted the encounter with the boys from the football team. "They came by earlier, trying to mock what I was doing. One of them said raising money for cripples wasn't as important as their fundraiser for new uniforms." "And how did you handle it?" Marcus asked, his voice filled with concern and pride. "I stood my ground," Jasmine replied confidently. "I told them helping people who can't afford health care is important too, and I wished them luck with their fundraiser." They didn't know what to say after that. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line before Marcus spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Jasmine, I can't tell you how proud I am of you. You handled that perfectly. You stood up for yourself and for those who can't always stand up for themselves. That's exactly what I've always hoped you'd do." Jasmine felt a warm glow of pride at her father's words. "Thanks, Dad. I just did what you've always taught me." "And you did it beautifully," Marcus affirmed. "But remember, not everyone will back down so easily. If anything feels off or makes you uncomfortable, don't hesitate to pack up and come home. Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise, Dad," Jasmine said, trying to keep the concern out of her voice. "Don't worry, everything will be fine." "That's my girl," Marcus replied, his tone lightening. "Go make a difference. I love you." "Love you too, Dad," Jasmine said, ending the call. As she slipped her phone back into her pocket, Jasmine felt an even stronger sense of purpose. Her father's words had fortified her, reminding her that she was doing something important, something that mattered. With renewed determination, she turned back to her lemonade stand, ready to face whatever challenges the day might bring. As the afternoon wore on, Jasmine noticed an elderly woman approaching. Her heart lifted when she recognized Dr. Elena Simmons, a retired physician who had given an inspiring career talk at her school last year. Dr. Simmons had been a huge inspiration to Jasmine, showing her that women, especially women of color, could excel in the field of medicine. "Well, hello there, Jasmine," Dr. Simmons greeted her warmly. "I see you're putting your entrepreneurial skills to good use." Jasmine smiled brightly. "Dr. Simmons, it's so good to see you. Would you like some lemonade? It's for a good cause." "I'd love some," Dr. Simmons replied, pulling out her wallet. "Let's make it a $5 donation, shall we? Now, tell me about this cause of yours." As Jasmine poured the lemonade and explained her fundraising efforts for those without access to health care, Dr. Simmons listened intently, her proud smile never fading. "You know, Jasmine," she said after taking a sip, "I remember when you told me about your dream of becoming a doctor. It's not an easy path, especially for a young black woman. But seeing you here today, taking initiative like this, it gives me hope." Jasmine felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you, Dr. Simmons. That means a lot coming from you." Simmons reached out and patted Jasmine's hand. "You're going to face challenges, my dear. Some people will try to tell you that you don't belong. But don't you ever believe them. You have a brilliant mind and a compassionate heart, and that's what makes a great doctor." Their conversation was suddenly interrupted by the sound of screeching tires. Jasmine looked up to see a police cruiser pulling up to the curb. Her heart skipped a beat, but she took a deep breath, remembering her father's words. Speak clearly. Don't let them rattle you. Chief Callahan stepped out of the car, his face set in a scowl as he surveyed the scene. Officer Green followed, looking uncertain. "What's going on here?" Callahan barked, striding toward the lemonade stand. Jasmine straightened her shoulders and met the chief's gaze. "Good afternoon, officer," she said, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. "I'm selling lemonade to raise money for charity. Would you like a cup?" Callahan's eyes narrowed. "You got a permit for this operation?" Jasmine's brow furrowed in confusion. "A permit? I didn't know." Jasmine stood frozen in disbelief as Chief Callahan's harsh voice cut through the air. "I needed one? It's just a lemonade stand for charity," she protested, her voice trembling. Callahan, however, wasn't having it. "Just a lemonade stand?" he repeated, his tone laced with sarcasm. "And I suppose the health department knows you're serving drinks to the public? Or maybe you've got your business license in order." Officer Green shifted uncomfortably beside his superior, clearly uneasy with the direction the situation was taking. "Chief," Green began cautiously, "maybe we should—" "Not now, Green," Callahan snapped, his attention fixed squarely on Jasmine. "Young lady, I'm going to need you to shut this down immediately." Jasmine felt panic rise in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Sir, I'm sorry if I've done something wrong. I can pack up if I need to, but could you please explain what the issue is?" Callahan's patience snapped. "Explain? I'll explain it to you down at the station. You're operating an illegal business and potentially endangering public health. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Jasmine's eyes widened in disbelief. "But, sir, Now!" Callahan bellowed, reaching for his handcuffs. A small crowd had started to gather, their murmurs growing louder as confusion spread. Phones appeared in people's hands, cameras recording the escalating scene. Officer Green stepped forward, his voice low and urgent. "Chief, I really think we should reconsider." But Callahan was past reasoning. In a swift, aggressive move, he grabbed Jasmine's arm, spun her around, and slapped the cold metal cuffs on her wrists. The sudden pain caused Jasmine to bite back a cry, her heart pounding with fear and shock. Callahan began reciting her Miranda rights, his words harsh and mechanical. Jasmine's mind raced, her father's voice echoing in her head. "If you need me, call." But how could she call when her hands were cuffed behind her back? She thought of her father, wishing desperately that he could be there right now. The crowd's murmurs had turned into shouts. "She's just a kid," someone yelled. "This is outrageous," another voice called out. Jasmine felt tears sting her eyes, but she fought to keep them back. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. As Callahan began to march her toward the patrol car, Jasmine caught sight of Mrs. Johnson, the elderly woman who had bought lemonade from her earlier. Pushing through the crowd, Mrs. Johnson called out, "Jasmine, honey, do you want me to call your father?" Jasmine nodded, her voice barely audible. "Yes, please. Tell him I need him." The back seat of the patrol car was hard and uncomfortable. Jasmine's hands, bound behind her, ached from the tight cuffs. Through the closed windows, she could still hear the crowd's angry voices. But more than anything, she felt an overwhelming sense of injustice burning in her chest. Outside the car, Officer Green was engaged in a tense conversation with Chief Callahan. Though Jasmine couldn't hear their words, she could see the frustration in Green's posture, his hands moving with forceful gestures. Inside the car, Jasmine tested the handcuffs, wincing as they dug into her wrists. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Stay calm," she whispered under her breath. Dad will come. He'll fix this. She knew her father's training as a government agent would be invaluable in a situation like this, but she also worried about the consequences of revealing his true identity to the town. What would people say? What would they think? Meanwhile, on the street, Officer Green had reached his breaking point. "Chief, this is completely unnecessary," he said, his voice low but firm. "She's a minor, for God's sake. We're supposed to protect the community, not terrorize it." Callahan's face was flushed with anger. "Are you questioning my judgment, Green? This is the kind of disrespect for law and order that's ruining this town. Sometimes you have to make an example." Something inside Green snapped. Years of silently witnessing injustice, of compromising his values, had finally caught up with him. He couldn't stand by any longer. "No, sir," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "I won't be part of this." Before Callahan could respond, Green walked over to the patrol car and opened the back door. Jasmine looked up at him, her eyes filled with both fear and hope. "I'm going to uncuff you," Green said softly. "There's no need for this. You haven't done anything wrong." He carefully worked the handcuffs off her wrists as Callahan stormed over, livid. "Green, what the hell are you doing?" Callahan barked. But Green ignored him, focused only on Jasmine. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Jasmine nodded, rubbing her sore wrists. "Can I call my dad now?" Green hesitated for a second, then nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his personal phone. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "Make it quick." Jasmine's fingers trembled as she dialed her father's number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before she heard his voice, tense and worried. "Hello? Who is this?" "Dad," Jasmine's voice cracked. "It's me. I need you. I'm in trouble." Marcus's tone immediately shifted, his voice becoming sharp with concern. "Jasmine, what happened? Where are you?" Jasmine quickly explained the situation, her voice shaking as she spoke. On the other end of the line, Marcus felt a surge of cold fury. He had spent years protecting his daughter from the ugliness of the world, from the realities of racial profiling and police overreach. But now, that same injustice had arrived on their doorstep. "I'm on my way," Marcus said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Stay calm, baby. I'll be there soon." As Jasmine ended the call, she looked up at Officer Green, who was standing protectively between her and Chief Callahan, who was now red-faced and shouting, "You're done, Green. Your career is over." But Green stood his ground, his face set in determination. "No, sir," he said quietly. "I think it's your career that's in jeopardy." As the confrontation between the two officers intensified, Jasmine sat quietly in the back of the patrol car, her father's words echoing in her mind. Stay calm. I'll be there soon. She knew that when her father arrived, everything would change. The town would finally learn the truth about Marcus Carter, and she couldn't help but wonder how they would react. Meanwhile, Marcus Carter's hands gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white as he sped through the streets of Millbrook. The normally calm and composed government agent was struggling to contain his rage. Years of training had taught him to keep his cool, to approach every situation with a level head. But this time was different. This time, it was his daughter. As he drove, flashes of Jasmine's childhood came to mind. Her first steps, her first day of school, the proud moment she told him she wanted to be a doctor. Every memory fueled his determination to protect her from the injustice she was facing. Marcus had always known this day might come. As a black man in law enforcement, he had seen firsthand the systemic issues plaguing the justice system. He had hoped, perhaps naively, that his position could shield Jasmine from those realities. But now, that illusion had been shattered. When he turned onto Jasmine Street, Marcus took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. One wrong move could make things worse for his daughter. He knew he had to handle the situation carefully, especially since his true identity might be revealed to the entire neighborhood. As he pulled up, the scene before him was chaotic. A crowd had gathered, their voices raised in protest. In the middle of it all, he could see two officers engaged in a heated argument. Jasmine was in the back of the patrol car, her face filled with a mixture of fear and relief when she saw him. Marcus parked his car and stepped out, his years of training kicking in as he assessed the situation. As he approached, the crowd parted, sensing the intensity in his stride. He could hear snippets of conversation as he passed by. "That's Jasmine's father. Thank God he's here. Someone needs to put an end to this madness. I wonder what he does for a living. He's always been so mysterious." But Marcus ignored the whispers, his focus solely on his daughter and the officers. As he drew closer, he braced himself for what was about to unfold. Marcus stepped forward, his calm voice laced with an unshakable authority. "I assure you, Chief, it's very possible," he said, his eyes fixed on Callahan's. "And right now, you're dangerously close to making this situation far worse for yourself and for this department." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. The once boastful and self-assured Chief Callahan now looked visibly shaken, his earlier bravado drained. He glanced around nervously, realizing just how public this moment had become. The cameras, the whispers, the growing anger from the community, it all weighed heavily on him. Officer Green, still standing by Jasmine's side, was the first to break the tension. "Chief," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "we need to end this now. This has gone way too far." Callahan's face twitched, his frustration and embarrassment clear. He struggled to maintain his control, but the realization of his mistake was written all over his face. His eyes flicked to Marcus's badge and then back to the crowd. He knew there was no way out of this without consequences. "Fine," Callahan spat, his voice low and bitter. "We'll release her." He turned sharply to Officer Green. "Uncuff her." Green, with a mixture of relief and determination, stepped forward and gently removed the handcuffs from Jasmine's wrists. She winced slightly as they came off, rubbing her sore skin, but she kept her chin high. Her father's presence, his unwavering calm, had given her strength. Marcus pulled Jasmine close to him, wrapping his arm protectively around her shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Jasmine nodded, her voice steady despite the tumultuous emotions running through her. "I'm fine now, Dad." The crowd, having witnessed the entire exchange, began to stir, their whispers growing louder. People were shaking their heads, their disbelief turning into quiet anger. A few neighbors, still recording on their phones, captured the scene as Officer Green guided Jasmine gently toward her father. Marcus, still standing tall, turned his attention back to Callahan. "Now, Chief," he said, his tone firm but controlled, "I expect you to offer an apology to my daughter for this unnecessary and aggressive act." Callahan's face flushed an even deeper shade of red. He hesitated, looking around at the faces watching him. The pressure was immense. With great reluctance, he straightened his shoulders and muttered, "I apologize for the misunderstanding." The apology was hollow, but Marcus, knowing when to push and when to let go, didn't force the issue. Instead, he held Callahan's gaze for a long moment, making sure the chief understood that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. "This isn't about just today," Marcus said quietly, stepping closer to Callahan. "You've been abusing your position for far too long. I'll be filing a formal complaint with the mayor and the department. This community deserves better." Callahan said nothing, his jaw clenched tight as Marcus turned and guided Jasmine away from the crowd. As they walked, the murmurs of the crowd grew louder. People were exchanging stories, shaking their heads, realizing that this incident wasn't isolated. It was a tipping point. Officer Green, still standing nearby, looked conflicted but ultimately relieved. He had done the right thing, but he knew that standing up to Callahan would come with its own set of challenges. As Marcus and Jasmine walked past, Green gave a respectful nod. Marcus returned it, acknowledging the officer's moral courage. Jasmine, now walking beside her father, felt a deep sense of relief, but also a strange sense of pride. She had been terrified, yes, but she had also stood her ground, just like her father had taught her. And now, seeing him stand up not only for her but for the entire community, filled her with an even greater resolve. As they reached their car, Jasmine turned to her father. "Dad," she said quietly, "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Marcus smiled down at her, his eyes softening. "You didn't do anything wrong, Jasmine. Sometimes standing up for what's right means facing things we don't expect. But you handled it perfectly. I'm proud of you." Jasmine's heart swelled at her father's words, and as they drove away, she couldn't help but feel that this day, as terrifying as it had been, was the start of something much bigger. Change was coming to Millbrook. And while it had started with a simple lemonade stand, it would soon reach far beyond that. Back at the scene, Chief Callahan stood still, his face set in a hard, angry scowl, but he knew deep down that his authority had been publicly challenged, and likely forever damaged. The community had seen through him, and now they had seen Marcus Carter, an FBI agent, someone who stood for justice in a way Callahan never had. As the crowd dispersed, the whispers lingered. This was more than just a moment of injustice, it was the beginning of a reckoning. The crowd, which had been stunned into silence, suddenly erupted with a cacophony of voices. Phones were raised higher, live streams capturing every second of the unfolding confrontation. In the background, someone could be heard frantically calling the local news station, the entire scene escalating into something much larger than anyone had expected. Jasmine, still standing close to her father, glanced up at him with a mix of relief and concern. The secret she and her father had kept for so long was now out in the open, and she wasn't sure how to feel about it. The life they had built under the radar was suddenly exposed. Officer Green, trying to balance duty with his growing sense of what was right, took a step forward. His face was set in grim determination. "Agent Carter," he said, his voice steady, "I want you to know that I was against this from the start. I tried to stop the chief." "I understand, Officer Green," Marcus cut him off, his tone professional but not harsh. "Your actions today will be noted in my report." Chief Callahan, who had been sputtering incoherently, finally found his voice. "Now, wait just a minute," he blustered, though the bravado he had displayed earlier had all but evaporated. "This doesn't change anything. The girl was still operating without a permit, and—" "Chief Callahan," Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp enough to cut through the chief's words, "I strongly advise you to stop talking." His tone was icy and calm, yet it carried the weight of undeniable authority. "You've already violated the civil rights of a minor, engaged in racial profiling, and abused your authority. Every word you say from this point on will be included in my report to the Bureau, the Mayor's office, and, if necessary, a federal court." Callahan's mouth snapped shut. His face drained of color as the full weight of his actions settled upon him. His eyes darted around, searching for some escape, but all he found was a sea of disapproving faces, raised phones, and judgmental stares. Marcus turned to the crowd, his voice calm yet authoritative, cutting through the chaos. "Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your concern and your desire to see justice done. I assure you, this matter will be thoroughly investigated. For now, I ask that you disperse and allow us to handle this situation." For a moment, the crowd hesitated. But slowly, reluctantly, they began to thin out, though many still lingered, phones recording every last moment. The atmosphere remained charged, and no one wanted to miss what came next. Marcus then turned his attention back to Callahan and Green. "Officer Green, I'd like you to take the chief back to the station. Inform the desk sergeant that Chief Callahan is to be placed on immediate administrative leave, pending a full investigation." Green nodded, visibly relieved. "Yes, sir." Callahan, who had been standing in stunned silence, found his voice again. "You can't do this," he sputtered, his voice shaking with desperation. "You have no authority here. This is my jurisdiction." Marcus's eyes hardened. "Your jurisdiction ends where federal law begins," he said. "And you crossed that line the moment you put handcuffs on my daughter for selling lemonade. Now, you have two choices. You can go with Officer Green voluntarily, or I can place you under arrest for civil rights violations. Which will it be?" The fight seemed to drain from Callahan all at once. His shoulders slumped, and for the first time, a flicker of shame crossed his face. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the patrol car, Green following closely behind. As the patrol car drove away, Marcus allowed himself a moment to breathe. He turned to Jasmine, who was watching him with wide, questioning eyes. "Dad," she said softly, "I'm sorry. I couldn't keep your secret." Marcus sighed, pulling her into a tight hug. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said gently. "You did nothing wrong. I'm sorry you had to go through this." Jasmine hugged him back, holding on fiercely. "It's okay, Dad. I understand. And thank you for everything." Father and daughter stood there, reunited, as the last rays of the setting sun bathed the street in a warm golden light. The lemonade stand, which had been the catalyst for so much drama, stood forgotten nearby. But both of them knew that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a long journey toward justice and change. In the days that followed, the small town of Millbrook found itself thrust into the national spotlight. The video of Jasmine's arrest and the dramatic revelation of her father's FBI status went viral, sparking heated debates about racial profiling, police overreach, and community policing. Chief Callahan's career, unsurprisingly, was over. The mayor, under intense public pressure, accepted his resignation within 48 hours of the incident. But the fallout didn't stop there. A full federal investigation was launched into the Millbrook Police Department, uncovering a history of discriminatory practices and procedural violations. Officer Green, recognized for his attempts to de-escalate the situation, was hailed as a hero by many in the community. He was thrust into a leadership role as the department underwent a massive overhaul, a position he accepted with determination and humility. His goal was to rebuild trust between the police and the community they served. For Jasmine, the aftermath was a whirlwind of emotions. Her lemonade stand had become a symbol of resistance against injustice. Interview requests poured in, and civil rights organizations reached out, offering support and platforms for her to share her story. Yet amidst all the chaos, Jasmine remained focused on her original goal. With the overwhelming support of the community, she organized a town-wide lemonade stand fundraiser. The event, which spanned several blocks and involved dozens of volunteers, raised over $50,000 for the community center and local charities. Marcus, for his part, faced his own challenges. His cover as a local father with a nondescript job was blown. After discussions with his superiors, he decided to transfer to a desk job at the local FBI field office. It was less exciting, but it allowed him to stay close to Jasmine and protect her without the constant worry of his undercover status. The neighborhood's reaction to Marcus's true identity was mixed. Some were in awe, while others felt betrayed by the secrecy. But with time, most came to understand why his discretion had been necessary, and they appreciated the sacrifices he had made to keep the community safe. Weeks after the lemonade stand incident, life in Millbrook began to return to normal. The police department, now under new leadership, implemented sensitivity training and community outreach programs. Town hall meetings, once sparsely attended, were now packed with engaged citizens eager to make their voices heard. Jasmine, inspired by her experiences, dove into her studies with renewed vigor. Her dream of becoming a doctor was now intertwined with a passion for social justice. She began planning a youth advocacy group at her high school, encouraging her peers to engage with local issues and stand up for what was right. One afternoon, a few weeks after the incident, Jasmine stood once again behind a folding table on her front lawn, selling lemonade. This time, however, she wasn't alone. Her friend Lena, who had once thought about dropping out of school, stood beside her with newfound confidence. Officer Green, now off duty and dressed in civilian clothes, chatted with neighbors as he helped pour lemonade. And Marcus, standing nearby, watched with pride as his daughter continued to make a difference, one cup of lemonade at a time. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the scene, Jasmine caught her father's eye and smiled. Both of them knew that the lemonade stand incident had changed their lives forever, but it had also opened the door to a future filled with hope and possibility. Later that evening, as the fundraiser was winding down, Jasmine noticed Dr. Elena Simmons, the retired physician who had inspired her dream of becoming a doctor, standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. Their eyes met, and Dr. Simmons approached with a warm smile. "Jasmine, my dear," Dr. Simmons said, her eyes twinkling with pride, "I've been watching the changes you've sparked since that day. I saw what happened with Chief Callahan, and I must say, you handled yourself with remarkable poise." Jasmine felt a rush of emotion at the older woman's words. "Dr. Simmons, I don't know what to say. Your words that day about the challenges I'd face, they came true sooner than I ever imagined." Dr. Simmons placed a gentle hand on Jasmine's shoulder. "Remember when I told you it wouldn't be easy? I had no idea how soon you'd be tested, but look at what you've already accomplished." She gestured to the diverse group of people gathered around. "This is just the beginning, Jasmine. The road ahead will be tough, but every person you help feel seen and cared for will make it all worthwhile." Jasmine nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose wash over her. "Thank you, Dr. Simmons, for everything. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Dr. Simmons replied with a warm smile. "Now, how about one last cup of lemonade for an old doctor?" As Jasmine poured the lemonade, she looked around at the scene before her. Her father chatting with neighbors, Lena laughing with friends, and Officer Green discussing community programs with interested citizens. She realized that her simple lemonade stand had become so much more than a fundraiser. It had become a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of standing up for what's right. Jasmine's story showed the world that even the smallest actions, like selling lemonade, could spark big changes. It reminded everyone that standing up for justice, even in the face of adversity, could ripple out and touch countless lives. If you were in Officer Green's shoes, torn between duty and doing what's right, would you have stood up to Chief Callahan? And if you were Marcus, would you have revealed your true identity to protect your child? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this story about Jasmine and her lemonade stand, I've got another heartwarming tale for you. Click here to watch it now.